So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending where you are, and a warm welcome to EnDev's fourth and last webinar in the learning agenda of the RBF facility, which was financed by UK Aid, coming to an end by the end of this year. Today, we will dive into our guiding theme of verification in RBF projects, value for money or waste of time. This webinar is the last one in our series, and I hope you enjoyed learning about RBF as much as we did. My name is Barbara Richard. I'm a team leader at the Energizing Development Program, and it's again my pleasure to be your moderator today. Before we start and go into some of you will share some housekeeping, the meeting netiquette, so that we all can enjoy this webinar the best way possible. So by continuing to be in this meeting, you are consenting to be recorded. In addition, please allow me to share some brief housekeeping information to enable a smooth webinar. Please ensure you are all muted and switch off your videos. We will collect questions through the chat box, which you see indicated here with the numbers 3 and 4. First, we are going to have time for questions directly on verification in the field, which is our first presentation. Secondly, we are going to have a combined question round on the two next presentations, applying verification tools. And then at the very end, we open the round for a larger round of discussion and questions from the audience. For all these questions, please just use the chat box. We are going to cluster and organize the questions behind the scenes to ensure a nice and good discussion for today. I do hear an echo, so who's not muted, please make sure that you mute your microphone, please. Thank you. Today, we are going to be shedding light on the UK aid-financed RBF facility implemented by EnDev, and I'm very happy to have our presenters from EnDev, SNV, and HEVOS on board to share their experience, and as well Philip Mann from FCDO to share the donor's perspective. With this said, I wish you all an interesting deep dive into the world of independent verification systems. And Phil, I hope you can hear us loud and clear. I would like to now hand over to Philip Mann, Senior Energy Advisor from the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO, of our British partners. So Phil, can you hear us?
I can hear you well. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Perfect. So good afternoon to the UK.
Good. Thank you very much, Barbara. So I'm very pleased to say a few words on behalf of the donor for the RBF facility, which is the Foreign Common and Development Office. Under the brand of UK Aid, we've supported the RBF program within EnDev over the last 7 years. And as many of you will know, one of the core objectives of the program, as well as delivering results on the ground, was to generate learning for all in the use of the RBF modality in building energy access markets. So this webinar is a really good opportunity to reflect on what the RBF program has learned about verification over this quite extensive period, especially given that this program was a pioneer in the use of RBF as a modality. And it's very timely given that there's a significant uptick in interest in the RBF as a modality to pull clean energy technologies into markets. And the value of RBF in bringing forward and accelerating markets for low carbon energy access is being increasingly recognized. There are a number of actors coming forward with quite significant investments in using RBF, and many of you will have heard of the recent announcement. And the EnDev RBF program will be of great value. So this webinar, we're going to focus on verification, which is a very important element of using RBF. And why is independent verification important? Well, clearly it's important to confirm the results from the program, independent from those delivering those results. And this brings credibility and it helps avoid malpractice. But I think we're also going to hear of some of the very important co-benefits of verification, including insights to markets and assistance with helping on quality assurance. So there are a number of reasons why we do independent verification, which is a central part of using RBF as a modality. Let me just say a few words on FCDO's view of value for money. So FCDO clearly has a duty to those living in extreme poverty and to the UK taxpayer to ensure that we do everything we can to maximise the value for money of our actions. This means making the best possible use of our resources to maximise the impact on poor people's lives. And at a programme level, BFM means we strive to design, procure, manage and evaluate our interventions to maximise impact. And this means looking at the 5 E's, which you'll be familiar with: the economy, efficiency, effectiveness and equity of our actions, which in turn help to drive cost effectiveness. So I think each of these in turn, verification has a role to play in helping us look at these different actions. So from an economy point of view, are we or our agents buying inputs of the appropriate quality and at the right price? Efficiency, how well are we or our agents converting these inputs into output? Are we spending well? On effectiveness, how well are the outputs produced by an intervention having the intended effect? So that's about spending wisely. And from an equity point of view, how fairly are the benefits distributed, spending fairly? So the results emanating from the verification process attached to all of the projects within the RBF programme have been really valuable in helping us as the donor to help the programme and also assess the value for money of the programme as we've gone along. We've really welcomed the level of verification and data that's come from that. And clearly that's only one of the benefits. I think it's worth, as I come to a close, it's worth reflecting on how technology has moved on pace since the start of the RBF programme. So we've seen the rapid rise of mobile communications and in particular the Internet of Things, which is increasingly emerging in the verification space and which I'm keen to learn more about. But I think overall there's clearly a balance in terms of verification between the extent and rigor of verification and its cost, and there's a very practical balance to be had there. It's clear that solid verification is not a waste of time, as we're invited to think about in the title of this webinar, but I think there are valuable lessons to be learned from the RBF programme on this balance between the extent and the rigor and the cost. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing from our expert practitioners and to a lively discussion in this webinar. And with that, I'll hand back to you, Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil, for putting the verification topic a bit into context and its importance, and as well the need to balance complexity. I know the presentations which are coming, so I'm pretty sure that they are going to be right to the point to the questions and thoughts you've raised. I would like to take on a kind of double role now, switching from moderator to speaker and into my role as a team leader in the EnDev program, to share some thoughts as well from the implementer side on portfolio level on independent verification. The very basis for any RBF approach is, of course, that funds are only dispersed to recipients once the pre-agreed set of results have been achieved. One of the key principles is that the independent verification of results is the trigger for the disbursement, which lies at the heart of any RBF project. Therefore, designing a robust independent verification system is really crucial, as the success of any RBF project lies on knowing if and when to pay incentives for the results companies claim to have achieved. In other words, that's the value you get for your money. In practice, of course, the world is more complex, and this complexity needs efforts for verification processes and is influenced by a number of factors, depending on the project that one is in. So you have eligibility criteria defining the requirements of the results to be assessed. You have certain target market actors or target groups, and as well different technology types, which can have pretty much impact on the way you approach verification. The RBF projects in our RBF facility were given freedom to design and apply flexible and context-specific approaches. And those range from applying digital tools to gain customer insights as applied in the Mekong region, to using independent verifiers to measure impacts beyond the sales results as done in Tanzania. Challenges are common, but they can be as well addressed by applying innovative ideas and approaches, which we will learn about in the presentation of HEVOS and Technobrain, to provide us with an example from Kenya. Whilst EnDev lessons learned may not necessarily apply universally, our experience offers a basis for answering a number of important questions. To mention just a few, what role do robust verification systems play in RBF projects? Which verification tools can be applied and what added value do they have? Are verification processes in RBF projects value for money or waste of time? Now, before I switch back into the moderator role, allow me to present our latest overview of KPI achievements in the entire RBF facility, where most of our projects have come to an end of implementation by end of September. So we are now at a point in time where we can actually communicate about the overall portfolio achievements. And I'm happy to share with you that by September of this year, more than 5.8 million people gained improved access to modern energy services through the RBF projects implemented in this facility. More than 1.5 million technologies were deployed, from improved cook stoves, solar water heaters, Pico PV system, solar appliances, biodigesters, and more than 42,000 people today have a connection to the grid, either a mini grid or grid extension and densification was facilitated. So overall, this is really a big success, achieving the initial targets of this large pilot project. That was really an interesting journey. Last but not least, as well, an announcement which will be very interesting for the people interested in verification. We are preparing as well a learning product on verification to allow everybody to even do a deeper dive into the world of RBF verification experience, which will be published in December, titled Rigorous Verification of Results, Value for Money or Waste of Time, following up on this webinar. So if you want to learn more, be ensured there is more coming after this webinar series. And with that, I think we are now all looking forward to hearing from our experienced RBF practitioners and enthusiasts diving into the respective verification systems and hearing really on the ground experience from our countries. Please be reminded, if you have any questions, content-wise in terms of understanding or overarching questions you would like to discuss, please use our chat box. And we will collect and cluster the questions behind the scenes. And with this, I would like to warmly invite our first speaker, whom is my dear colleague here at headquarters, Dennis Barbiam, an RBF advisor at the EnDev headquarters team. But formerly, he was working for our partner organization, SNV, and in charge of one of the RBF projects in Cambodia. Dennis will illustrate how verification was conducted in the field and how customer insight was gained based on collection of socioeconomic data. So Dennis, please, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Barbara, for this kind introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Dennis Barbian. I am an RBF advisor at EnDev headquarters, and I'll kick off the speaker inputs today by giving you a glimpse into the verification system of the EnDev Mekong RBF project, for which I was a project manager a few years ago. Next slide, please. So to give a bit of context, the Mekong RBF project ran from 2015 to 18, was one of the regional projects in the EnDev RBF facility, and was implemented by SNV in Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. The project worked with so-called advanced biomass cook stoves. These are cook stoves that still burn wood and charcoal, but are significantly more fuel efficient and healthier than other biomass stoves. The technology had only started emerging a few years before the project began, and the project became one of the first ones globally to create a market for this new type of technology. Of course, this being an RBF project, the project used financial incentives to increase the engagement of private sector actors in the market. Next slide, please. Now, there might be audience members here today who are not yet familiar with the topic of verification. So we wanted to use this first presentation to get into the basic nuts and bolts of what verification for RBF purposes means, what it looks like. I'll present this to you along the example of this project, specifically the project component in Cambodia, because it uses a relatively low-tech and low-cost approach to verification that could potentially be applied in any RBF project. And there might be some lessons and insights here that might be useful for others as well. So in this particular project, last mile cook stove distributors received RBF incentives for sales of stoves and for providing initial usage instructions to their customers. The incentives would, of course, that's the heart of any RBF project, only be paid once these transactions had in fact been completed and independently verified by an IVA, an independent verification agent. How to go about verification in an RBF project, the rules, the roles, the responsibilities, that's best defined up front in a document, in a verification guidelines document, or in the project's operational manual. Next slide, please. So this is the overview of the verification process of this project, and many RBF projects would see some form of these steps. It usually starts with a project participant submitting a claim for incentives, for example, in the form of a sales report. Most often that's a simple Excel sheet that contains customer addresses and telephone numbers, the type of product they bought, and a unique identifier of the product, such as a serial number. And usually there's a form of paper trail between the seller and the customer to prove that the sale took place. So for example, a sales contract, a receipt, or a warranty card, and then this can be used as a first level of verification. If the project works with mass-produced identical products or products that are movable, then unique identifiers such as serial numbers can really help to ensure that the same product doesn't receive incentives more than once. Now, the project's IVA would then draw a random sample of customers to conduct the telephone and on-site verification. The sampling method, that's something that's often unique to each project and depends on a range of factors. I'll discuss this a bit more in a minute in the lessons learned section. And then the IVA performs the telephone and the field verification. In this particular project, the IVA used an electronic questionnaire on a tablet computer so that the findings could be uploaded directly into the project's master database. And then after receiving the verification report, the project calculates and disperses the incentives according to the findings. Now, if there are negative findings or irregularities, such as suspected fraud when customers cannot be traced, then the project would need to take measures that would have already been described ahead of time in the operation manual. So I included some indications of processing times here. These are, of course, highly dependent on each individual project, on the number and size of claims that need to be verified, on the speed of the IVA, on the geography of a country, on the speed of your own organizations to disperse funds, and so on. Next slide, please. Now, to make this a bit more visual, these are some photos from the actual field verification of this project. Keep in mind, please, that this project took place in a time before GSM-enabled remote monitors or Internet of Things technology for remote. Here, the process usually started with tracking down the end users in remote rural areas. So having verification agents who are used to navigating rural areas pays off really quick. Once the end users had been found, the agent started the verification survey to confirm the customer's identity, their location, the presence of the product. The agents also ensured that the serial number on the stove would match the number provided in the claim. And as part of the survey, the agents were also required to take a photo of the project stove to deliver proof that the visit took place. and also a photo of the end user's house for unique traceability and to capture GPS coordinates for the project's master database. Next slide, please. Yeah, and this data can then also be visualized in an interactive map. This project used purely off-the-shelf IT tools that anyone can buy. So without needing IT experts or special software licenses, this is a relatively low-tech and affordable approach for a project to create some useful verification tools. And next slide, please. So as a co-benefit or an added value, the data collected through the verification process can really yield a lot of powerful and valuable information about the project, about the beneficiaries, about the technology, about the performance of the participating enterprises. I had mentioned before that this project worked with a relatively new stove technology for which there was not much experience yet globally. So we felt we had a special responsibility to contribute to the clean cooking community by analyzing the durability and the acceptability of these stoves very carefully. That's something we were able to do through this verification process relatively easily. We could find out whether baseline stoves were getting replaced, how much the intervention stoves were used, which features end users liked about the stoves and which ones they didn't, what percentage of stoves broke down and what type of technical errors occurred with the technology and so on. Next slide, please. Now on to some recommendations and lessons, and this is already my last slide. RBF projects require project participants to collect customer data that they would perhaps not typically collect for themselves. This might feel like an extra burden to companies, and they might not have the appropriate systems for data collection in place. For several of the EnDev RBF projects, it's actually known that they had to help companies to set up such systems. Of course, this depends on the type of enterprise we work with. Certainly applies more to, say, smaller local enterprises. And one way to introduce this is to really frame this as an opportunity for enterprises as well, to start building customer relationship management systems from which their businesses will then also benefit in the future. The acceptability of verification activities varies quite a bit, sometimes for cultural reasons. So for instance, in Cambodia, households are known to be very welcoming, apparently also to strangers who come to ask questions about their cook stoves. In neighboring Vietnam, people would have much more privacy concerns. In terms of technology, this project faced some challenges in the Lao country component to obtain customer contact information there, because people were not necessarily willing to leave their contact information for a $5 stove. Here we organized a lucky draw where customers could leave their contact information at the point of sale for a chance to win a prize. So that was a workaround to get contact information as well. I had alluded to it already. Choosing the right IVA partner for your verification task goes a long way in ensuring the success of your project. This project here used field surveyors from a social research firm that was experienced in navigating rural areas, and they were also able to draw on a pool of enumerators who were based directly in the project district. So that helped. It's typically not too complicated to select an IVA, since in most cases local actors exist already who have some familiarity with monitoring type tasks. But it's also useful to think outside of the box. Perhaps there's a local NGO that could be trained to take over the task. You can also consider using different IVAs for the phone and the field verification if that's more economical. For example, a call center might be an elegant solution for the phone checks. For the verification frequency and the turnaround times, this is a key learning from many of the RBF projects that's also near and dear to my heart. Always keep in mind that RBF recipients critically depend on receiving payments in a predictable manner, because their business financials, their ability to pay for their business expansion, staff depends on receiving RBF funds that they've planned with. So the timing of RBF payments should be firm and reliable. Especially large bulk claims may lead to delays in incentive disbursement. A possible solution to this is to accept and to verify claims more frequently or even on an ongoing basis. And then lastly, verification doesn't have to be expensive, and it's a common misconception that it is. There's a couple of simple measures that projects can take to reduce costs. Verification can happen in sequence, for example, from paper trail to phone, to more costly field verification only if irregularities are found. Geographical clustering makes a lot of sense. It's not fully random anymore, but it definitely helps with cutting costs. Larger claim sizes are more cost effective to verify than smaller ones. As the claim size increases, the sample size increases much less. So for example, for a claim of 50 units, you would need to verify 44 products to be statistically accurate. For a sample of 10,000 units, you only need to verify between 300 and 400 units. So a project can also do some claim size steering and accept minimum claim sizes or maximum claim frequency. I think I might be out of time, so I'll stop here. I hope this was useful, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dennis. I think this was surely very crystal clear. We didn't receive any questions in the chat box, and I think this was a beautiful presentation to set the scene and get all our minds into the world of verification, what the typical steps are, and as well this challenge of managing complexity and as well for balancing basically the effort and the added value that verification brings with us. So to the audience, if you have any questions to as well this first presentation, please feel free to start using the chat box. We are going to have as well a discussion at the very end in general on the topic. I see here now there is more compliments coming in the chat box. Indeed, no questions, but this has been crystal clear. Then I would say we proceed to our next speaker. And now I would like to invite us all to shift a little bit our perspective, to move from Asia to Africa and from cook stoves to solar. Now we are looking into Tanzania and zoom into the application of verification tools, which is the second block of the topics we are looking into today. I would therefore like to invite Josh Sebastian, consultant and project member with SNV, who was the brain behind the implementation of the solar RBF in Tanzania. He will show us how verification processes can be designed to deliver on the results and impact using lean data. So Josh, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Pleasure to be with everyone, wherever you may be today. My name is Josh Sebastian. As Barbara has graciously introduced, I've had the privilege to work with SNV in Tanzania since the beginning of the RBF program in 2013 to its conclusion through in August of this year. So today I'd like to speak more building upon Dennis's presentation on verification on sales and outputs, on some lessons we've learned there, towards verification on outcomes or service delivery quality. Next slide, please. Oh, next slide, please. The Tanzania program, as I mentioned, has been running since 2013, and in its first phase until 2018 would be considered maybe now more of a traditional RBF instrument. The values of the incentives themselves were based on the energy service performance of the products, and the payments were dispersed in a single installment, more on a quarterly basis, or depending on the submission dates of the firm. In a closing phase and exiting the market in 2019 to 2020, the program added some new elements. This included valuation of incentives to reflect more the vulnerability of the markets in which they were being sold, and as well a second installment payment dispersed at a later time based on outcomes of services to customers in rural areas. Next slide, please. So in our first case, lessons, as already shared by Dennis, were learned, and actually some principles were derived over that time. One was the high value of having multiple perspectives. In our particular case, we used varying parties in phone and on-site verification. So there wouldn't be just one on-site verifier, there would be several and several phone verifiers. Also the use of other local actors at varying scales, including the fund management financial institution of Tanzania Development Bank, all pulling their perspectives together so that we could get a full picture. The other element was that verification was enriched or more valuable if presented as a value-added service. So we found customers were overwhelmingly positive to sharing their experiences and gathering their insights. So we built upon this as not just having verification as a policing exercise, but an opportunity for them to express their satisfaction, their dissatisfaction, and gain overall learning in the market. These elements then all became crucial to compiling together to create a relatively robust portrait of what was happening in markets that we could feed back to the suppliers themselves. So the next slide, please. And what we found through that was that the suppliers had high value and experience from the feedback to the extent that they said it was almost as valuable in some instances as the incentives themselves. Verification is a unique instrument, a unique element where you have a rare opportunity to talk with a relatively high volume of customers on a regular period at a much greater degree than what companies themselves would normally be able to do. So perspectives on unique market challenges, product functionality are all of high and extreme value to the private sector. Next slide, please. So in the closing periods of the fund in 2019 to 2020, we reflected on how we can build upon this and how we could structure and get more concision in the huge amounts of data we were getting. And what we came across also was then the lean data methodology as being applied and developed and deployed by Acumen. So the question will be, what is lean data? It's actually a concise and consistent means of measuring impact in standardized metrics. So this includes qualifications for your poverty reach, customer satisfaction, as expressed by whether they would recommend products to their friends or families or neighbors, the degree and extent of challenges they experience. However, as well, what was unique to lean data was that it employed the use of benchmarking. So none of these metrics stood in a silo or in isolation. If you say to someone, your net promoter score was, in this case, like 83%. What does that mean? Well, it means you have a strong positive perception from your customers that they would recommend the unit. But what does that mean compared to everybody else? So the benchmarking actually compiles the figures of other firms in the program or at wider industry levels so that firms can see how they are performing compared to a different sphere of their peers. So next slide, please. So what did we learn through the process? Actually, we found overall in the Tanzania program, firms as a whole were performing quite well compared to East Africa industry norms or to the benchmark. Delivery of this second wave of verification done by 60 decibels, which is a unique and distinct entity that emerged from Acumen explicitly and specifically for delivery of lean data. Now, what's the value of this is that it actually, in real time, contextualized was the program functioning and reaching its ambitions to, have effective poverty reach. Were the products and qualities of the units meeting the needs and demands of customers? As well, we can look on the aggregate that we did quite well, but we can also see on an individual level for each company that not everyone performed above and beyond the bar in every measure, so that firms could get a precise indication of areas that maybe they need to improve their performance and delivery. As well, through time, this proved to be extremely valuable with the advent of COVID to gain insights to the customer experience. And in our concluding phases, we did a final round also to try and assess and engage the quality of the employment experience for local persons. Next slide, please. So in conclusion and overall, having gone from traditional, more output-oriented verification all the way through to more outcome-oriented verification, what have we learned? Well, a huge thing is that context when you're verifying is crucial. The use of benchmarking and consistent measures has high value in return for persons and firms to know where they're performing and how they're doing relative to something, right? And also extending the timeline of verification also made it much more of an interesting process to see how we can effectively steer the design and operations of the fund to meet needs for sustainability in the long term. We also very clearly saw that players will proactively address an issue if it's concisely articulated to what is actually happening where. So I think you can see in verification, particularly outputs on sales, you'll get a huge amount of data, but contextualizing it, getting it standardized, and getting it focused provides a tangible point for firms to tackle more specific issues. Now, that being said, output and outcome, or output and sales verification and outcome and service quality verification are a bit of unique animals, and they should work together in tandem. One shouldn't really be replacing the other. Improving outcome-oriented metrics, like customer service delivery, requires a lot of time, and you may not see an improvement for upwards of 12 months. This is compared to typical output or sales oriented verification where the reward cycles are very quick. So when you're designing an RBF, if you're going to look at employing the use of outcome verification, be attentive then that that you create enough time and space for firms that are investing to improve their performance, not to be penalized while they're doing that, because it won't reflect overnight in their outcome verification scoring. So next slide, please, and concluding slide. So I'm sure there will be questions coming afterwards. I saw them coming in the box. I'll be happy to discuss them further at that time. But I'd just like to leave it on this note of, in this quote that came from actually some outcome level surveys with agents, and in terms of value for money, beyond the immediate sale, and the acquisition and that purchase, I think we'll see levels in varying degrees. There's high levels of return on investment and high degrees of value for money. You know, not just today, but tomorrow, but also coming and creating valuable jobs, employment opportunities, and experiences that will, with solar, that will not just return today, but I think you present.
Thank you very much, Josh, as well. A very interesting presentation. As you've seen, this has sparked some interest to discuss. As announced at the beginning, we would like to first hear Victoria's presentation, because both presentations belong, let's say, to a group targeting the topic of tools. We are, as indicated, clustering your questions behind the scenes. So we are not jumping over the questions which have come in on Josh's presentation, but we'll open the floor for those questions after we've heard the next presentation, which is our last presentation for today. And now we will learn about the biogas RBF project in East Africa. So same region, different technology, and very different technology and market. And I would like to invite Victoria Ndungu, the Regional Monitoring, Evaluation and Learning Manager at HEVOS in Kenya, to share with us which challenges can as well occur during verification and how these can be addressed using innovative approaches and tools. So Victoria, it's a pleasure to have you with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Victoria, and I work for HEVOS. I headed the Monitoring and Evaluation Department for the Africa Biogas Partnership Program, as well as for the RBF program. I will make a small introduction about the 4BF project and also ABPP. The Biogas Business Boost Benefiting Farmers Project, which is 4BF in short, was a component of the Africa Biogas Partnership Project that was implemented from 2009 to 2020 in 5 African countries, that is Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. The program was aimed at establishment of a market-oriented sector, allowing the rural and peri-urban communities to access clean energy for cooking, heating, to significantly increase productivity for their farms through use of bioslurry. And by March 2020, ABPP had facilitated construction of about 71,000 biogas digesters, providing clean energy for cooking and heating to almost 500,000 people. We had 2 phases of the program, and during the second phase, at the onset of the second phase in 2014, we experienced quite some challenges that almost led to the collapse of the market. And that is when the RBF project was introduced to address some of the challenges within the market ingredients. We have provided a link on the PowerPoint. You can follow up to clearly understand the program. The slide below shows the structure and evolution of incentives. The incentives has really evolved over time. Initially, we had the credit sanction incentives that was targeting reduction of transaction costs for the MFIs, while giving credit to the biogas users. And the other one, which we call the quality plant incentives, was targeted to the biogas masons to improve plant functionality through provision of after-sales service. However, with time, those 2 were not very popular, and we had to go back and redo the incentive structure. And we only got 2 incentives, and one was the same quality plant incentives, but this time it was merged, it was not split into 2. And then we got the sales incentives that now targeted sales. When you broker a deal and get to sell a biodigester, you received an incentive. So why were the 2 incentives very important for our program? And as I had earlier mentioned, the RBF project complemented ingredients missing in ABPP. So within the complex structure of ABPP, the blue boxes actually shows you where 4BF came to fit in, the RBF project came to fit in. So ABPP needed leverage on the biogas companies and enterprises to take up responsibility for functionality of the plants through after-sales service. Because if you construct a plant, you don't offer after-sales service, the probability is that that plant may not function And also, we needed to have them construct right from the word go. We needed also to enhance the reputation and integrity of the sector players. And also we needed to ensure that we convert more leads, that we get more people actually taking up the biogas technology. And that is what 4BF actually came to complement. And to be able to do all that, we needed to do things differently. And one of the things we did differently was to overhaul the whole monitoring and verification structure and establish a new robust monitoring and verification system. The system could actually address some of the challenges we experienced from the program. And one of them was that we had such long paper trails for all the data collected. We had such long data flow processes, some up to 4 weeks. From the time data was entered on the paper, it could take us almost 4 weeks before it could reach our systems. And there were too many data errors, mostly human errors, and we were not able to know the status of plants across the country, just to mention a few of some of the challenges we were facing. So below, on the next slide, I will briefly talk about the new monitoring and verification system we developed, because we know that the verification system cannot work in isolation. It needs to be hitched on a very strong and robust monitoring system. And one of the things we did is that we totally switched to paperless data collection through an Android-based data collection app. And this time, the masons themselves, the constructors, are the ones who could fill out the tools. And to make this happen, we actually had to pre-finance the purchase of Android phones for them. And this was repaid back from the incentives. And for sure, this was a first for them, because most BCs never owned an Android phone. Some did not even own any phone at all. So it was really, really important for them to do that. So we were able to capture such quality data of the plants. We were able to capture GPS coordinates for the plant, so we know where the plant actually is. We could be able to take pictures of the biogas plant with a unique code easily visible, and that avoided duplication of data. And the important bit was that the tools were actually in the local languages. If the BC was in Tanzania, the tool came in Swahili. If they're in Ethiopia, the tool came in Amharic. And this data was all real time. From the system, you can see the second stage is the web-based management system, which was purely automated. Once the plant was received on the purely automated system, it was automatically forwarded to the call center for verification. I'll give you a snapshot of the call center later for verification. And this was done through calling clients using scripts shared by HIVOS. And the report that came back from the call center is actually the one that triggered the disbursement process. The system is fully automated, and data from all the above processes, be it CSC, be it the data collected from field, is all linked to a plant using a unique identifier. And it ensures that payments are actually done on a timely manner and to those BCEs or sector players that actually deserve it. And the process is very transparent because the sector players are able to come into the system and be able to see their data and the stage at which the data is at. It has reminders or prompts on when the plant is due for after-sales service, for example, or the system is also able to tell where the stage, at what stage is the plant in? Has it been verified? Has the incentive been paid? Is the plant functioning? Is this plant included in the carbon credit program? So the system is able to tell all that. However, CSC, the call center, was not just about verification. It also had other roles it was playing. And in the next slide, I will talk briefly about the call center. We outsourced the call center from a BPO system. And it was actually hosted by each individual country that RBF was being implemented. And the big advantage is that all the calls were made in the local dialect. So there was no issue with languages. And beyond the verification of plant, the CSC could also do many other things. And the first one is that on annual basis, we could sample about 12% of the total database. And we try to establish the satisfaction levels of the households using the Net Promoter Score, just like Josh mentioned. The other important bit is that data from CSC actually informs program quality control. All we needed to do is ask a question in the scripts that we shared with the CSE, and we are able to know what quality control measures do we need. The program also analyzes the credibility of BCEs and grades them accordingly. So a good grade actually helps a BCE or a constructor get more referrals. A report from the CSE is actually the trigger for payment, for incentive payments, and also referrals, which is one of the strongest modes of promotion for biogas, was also generated from that. But also the CSE is able to do simple troubleshooting. Issues that farmers come with, we gave them a question manuscript for frequently asked questions, and they were able to do simple troubleshooting. And of course, we did a lot of training, but also finally, CSE has been accepted by the gold standard as a credible verification mechanism for plant usage, because plant usage is a key determinant for inclusion of carbon credits program, inclusion of plants into the carbon credits program. So we are very proud and happy that the call center, our verification methodology from RBF has actually been accepted as one of the determinants. So we also conduct surveys using the whole monitoring and verification system. So it is not just it's just not verification, it does many more things. And since we operate in many countries, the whole verification process is guided by a 3-tier data verification protocol that everybody follows. And it starts, of course, with the data collection with the mobile app. The data is sent to the web-based salesforce system, and then it's forwarded to the call center. And what the call center does is they try and contact the households and give us 2 reports. Is the household reachable or unreachable? And for them to tell us a household is not reachable, they will have dialed that household 6 times. And they will send out an alert to the farmer to tell them, can we call you at 6 p.m. or 8 p.m.? What time is best for you? Once a plant is reached, they will give us 2 reports. One, whether the plant is okay and is functioning and it qualifies for incentive payments, or if it is not functioning, then it is flagged. And once a plant is flagged, it is now moved to the 2nd tier of the verification protocol, which involves the quality service providers. These are independent verifiers who are actually contracted by HIVOS on an annual basis. And what they do is they do on-site verification, they visit the households and find out if that plant actually exists or if it is functioning, and then they will locate for disbursement of incentives. And if they find the plant does not exist or is not functioning, they will forward it now to the 3rd tier, which is the program staff. And then the program staff will visit the plants and they will, if retain the, if to expel the plant from the database. And out of all the plants that actually receive incentives, 5% of these are randomly selected and they are visited physically just to triangulate the data that we got from CSE and the quality service incentive service providers. So what are some of the insights and the learnings from the verification process? One of it is that automation, the less the human interference, the less the errors. And it makes it very easy to detect incidences of fraud. And that was one of the challenges we had, that the data flow process was too long, too many human interferences. We were not able to tell when errors came about. There's better efficiency and effectiveness when functions like finance, monitoring and verification, and quality controls are integrated. It not only saves time, but it also helps to work with a leaner team. Initially, we had a team of more than 30 people collecting data out there, but now we only work with 1 person per country, which is really, really cost effective. The ability to have 360-degree view of a biodigester plant increases one's span of control. You know how a plant is functioning all times of the year, and this really, really helps with the span of control. A mix of both calling and physical visitation, integration of both helps in triangulation of data. So you are sure if there are errors that the CSE could have made, which is rare, you are able to triangulate them through visiting of the plants. A system that is robust, is flexible and adaptable to many settings or products, not just biogas. This is a system that can actually be scaled to other products like solar, is a key ingredient in the success of all of a verification system. And finally, there is no growth without learning. Learning has to be continuous, feedback has to be continuous, especially from the people using the system or the people even feeding the system, and that's how we have grown. And if you want a credible verification system, then you have to get data right from the beginning. Is verification value for money or a waste of time? My answer would be yes. Without a doubt, verification is value for money. A backbone of RBF, it not only sparks creativity, but it's also a gateway to effective and efficient programs. And I would go for it anytime. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Victoria. So I think the chat box clearly indicates that now we've sparked the interest of the audience and everybody is full in on thinking about verification. I've seen a lot of really interesting questions coming in. So we've started to cluster behind the scenes and some of the questions which were indicated for one of our speakers, I would actually take into our general discussion with us, as I think the others will as well have interesting insights on that. I saw actually two very specific questions, Josh, to your presentation, which I would like to take first and then start to open on for the more general questions which we've seen. So Josh, I saw right during the presentation and right afterwards two specific questions coming in, and that was specifically to your case, working with various different EVAs, if what you observed in that regard, if there were different levels of quality, if it was all on the same level, and how did you balance out having different partners for the independent verification? And secondly, there was a question, as you indicated, that you went back for a second verification cycle. If you encountered any challenges or have any tips and tricks to share how to find people after 3 months, 6 months, or even 12-month time. As this, of course, is always, if you are aware about reality in our partner countries, a pretty tricky thing to do.
Yeah, on the first question with using multiple IVAs, like verification on the output level is actually quite structured and is, you know, very much to standard templates, and it's really on, you know, pass-fail metrics, right? So in terms of, you know, the consistency of what was coming back on that level, it was not really so much of a concern. You could use multiple players. The feedback and what different players would capture could be variable, but it was typically on more, you know, technical issues, or some of them, you know, they would catch more qualitative and story narrative-based issues as well. But on the straight verification level, there's not that much variability. At the end of the day, the product is there or it's not. I think speaking to that as well, though, the use of varying parties, you know, also was an added value in limiting elements of collusion. If you have one IVA and they have the entire power to pass or fail a claim, you create all different kinds of risks where you, in our case, we diffuse that power because people could pass or fail an individual verification of a customer, but no individual party had the absolute power to entirely fail a claim. Yeah. The second question, could you just remind me, Barbara, what it was related to?
That was the question that you indicated you had a second verification cycle for the very same results, going back after a specific number of months, and people wanting to learn if you encountered challenges or have tips and tricks to hint them how to find people going back into the field.
No, actually did not prove to be a problem. This was one key area I was really curious to see, like, okay, we go back this much further, what are we going to find? Customers were there, phone numbers were valid. I think we would find, according to 60 decibels, you know, the indications that people were there were to levels they consistently saw across the industry. In terms of finding people, I think it speaks to Victoria's presentation as well. Like, you really got to make sure the data going in is is good, right? And that was actually one thing that we learned. We really had to, when the information was coming in, a key area has always been to really get clear and strong location data, and not to GPS levels, because agents were changing, their phone settings and everything would go out of whack. But getting consistent, place name levels that are manageable and constant across the players proved to be crucial, and can't be understated enough how important that is to get straight from the outset.
Okay, thank you very much. There are still more questions coming in. Really nice to see our audience is so active today. I would like to encourage you as well on all the small questions that you are raising, which sometimes just need a yes or no as an answer. Use our chat box to as well communicate among yourselves. Seeing the number of questions coming in, we will not be able to discuss each and every question. As in our former webinars, we are of course collecting all questions and as well checking how we can embed them into the upcoming learning products, specifically in this case for the upcoming learning product on verification. I think as we have so many interesting questions coming up, I would like to now smoothly go into the general discussion, picking out some clusters of questions we have received and then opening the floor to all our speakers, addressing questions to them, and then whoever feels like having a good answer to it is warmly welcome to share their thoughts and views. I think one interesting question is we have heard now a lot about verification is more than just confirmation of a result to trigger a payment. We've heard a lot about additional added value of data, of insights gained, of learning about co-benefits, of outcome level information. So I would like to open the floor to all our speakers to share their thoughts on the added value of sharing that information and making this accessible to others. What would you pick out as the main lessons learned and recommendation to other implementers how to make use of this wealth of data?
I would be happy to make a start on that question.
The floor is yours.
Thanks. So yeah, on this question of whether maximum value was gained from the data and how far sharing of data can go. I have similar experiences to Josh of working on several RBF projects where the participants actually reported back that they appreciate the findings from the verification process almost more than the financial incentives that they would receive. So I worked on a biogas where the verification also had the purpose of quality control, really finding out if the biogas installations in the field complied with eligibility and quality criteria. And the biogas enterprises actually integrated this into their own after-sales approach and quality assurance approach, to the point even that their field staff would receive bonuses when the quality control came out positive. So it was really helpful for them as a process to improve their own business processes as well. And then the same for the cookstove project that I presented on. I mentioned we learned a lot about this new technology and we fed that back to the enterprises, actually. I mean, that would really have been a pity if we had kept all those findings to ourselves. So we know of several of those cookstove companies that then actually came up with new iterations of their product based on the findings from the verification process and based on learning which materials work in the field or which parts of the stove break first. So that was really helpful. But yes, there is also, of course, limitations to what you can share. Sometimes you feel in a project you have sort of like a bird's eye view because you get the data from all participating companies, but you might not necessarily share all that back, again, for, of course, non-disclosure reasons. And so, yeah, there's limitations to that, of course. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Josh, Victoria, if you want to add something, of course, you're more than welcome, but as well, feel free to skip one of the questions. We don't need 3 answers each and every time, so up to you.
I can't really add much more than what Dennis has said, so.
Okay, Victoria, if you don't want to add anything, then I would just pick out another question, which I think is pretty interesting and which goes now to, let's go to the heart of what we heard about. There is one interesting question which is circling around as well the topic of today, which is basically the added value, or are we just running a costly system? So it's about the cost-benefit ratio, and there's specifically if you as project managers could enlighten us a little bit about the balance between incentive payments and absolute numbers and the costs of the verification and monitoring system. And especially, Josh, that one goes to you. When working with lean data, did you do an analysis beforehand to take that decision to go for lean data? Was it as well a decision on a budget decision basis? Were there any additional added values that you saw in going for the lean data approach? To enlighten us a little bit about this, what do people need to calculate in terms of shares in their project budget, and what can you give them as a recommendation?
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. Actually, I saw that question coming through and did some quick budget checking on that. So overall, in the grand scheme of the fund, the total verification costs for output and outcome-oriented verification as applied in the last 2 years amounted to 6% of the total fund value, and about between 9 to 10% of the incentive value. So it can be affordable and it can be manageable. Right? I think why we added the outcome element, I think speaking to some other observations as well, and how it was tied to the payments, is that the cash-based sales was still the basis of this. So that was 80% of the incentive values were awarded upon achievement of the output. We withheld only 20% of the installment to see what would happen on the outcome level, just because we didn't know what was going to happen on this. So it's a bit of an experiment. So this is also how firms, bought in on it, and it wasn't. And also how they were rewarded was based on their performance against the benchmark. So if they met the benchmark, they got the full payment. If they were 10% below the benchmark, then they would lose 10% of the 20%. Right? This was basically a learning process to figure out how to go about it. So it wasn't. It was more to encourage the learning elements. So in terms of cost effectiveness, there's a variety of methods that can be applied. I would say on a cost efficiency level, as Dennis has already mentioned, you'll have a variety of players in there, right? So you'll have large guys where your cost efficiencies will be much higher when you have larger claims for varying reasons, right? But also use that cost efficiency wisely, right? Like don't treat it on a claim by claim basis. You operate the entire fund. So that efficiency we could gain on some of the larger players, we use that for smaller and emerging players to invest, more time, or the higher cost, or it's not, their claim is small, maybe 5,000 euros in total. The verification cost may have been at the beginning equal to some of their, or closer to the value of their claims in some instances. But that's an investment we made in the longer term, because the insights gained then also assisted them to grow, right? So, don't just always treat it as what it is per every single instance. Also think about it holistically in terms of the fund and what's the overall goal and ambition of the fund to achieve in developing the sector.
Thank you. Victoria, Dennis, anything you would like to add?
Yes. For the biogas program, in terms of efficiency, there is no doubt about it. This is more efficient, and one of the things we did is we have saved so much time, and the other one is in terms of cost. If you look at a country like Kenya or Tanzania, the budget, the verification budget before was about 150,000 euros. But when we introduced the system, it reduced to about 30,000 euros. And previously, we had more than 15 to 20 staff who would go and do verification for only 10% of the total production. But this time, with the verification system we set up, we do a total census. Every plant that is actually installed is called, and at least 5% of all the plants that are installed are actually visited. So for us, this is a very, very efficient system. There is no doubt about it.
I can also just briefly add a statistic as well, just for sake of completeness. I also anticipated that this question would come up, so I had a look at the budget. We spent in this Cambodia component of the Cookstove project around €3 on verification for each stove that came into the market, whereas we paid between 12 and 25 euros in incentives. So that's sort of like the ratio in this project.
Okay, thank you very much to all speakers. I need to admit, Josh, you already hinted to the next question cluster I had on my list, so I will take that one next. We had some questions circling around and sparked by Josh's presentation on what about RBF on outcome level. So as Josh explained, if I understood that correctly, in the Tanzania approach, the second verification and basically a second incentive payment was only 20% of the overall incentive payment. But I don't want to hide from you that, of course, we are as well working on the next level of RBF approaches. And as we have Dennis here on board, who is actually our lead on those projects, and I think we have seen as well our dear colleague from the Swiss Development Corporation online, Andrine Fink, with whom we are implementing a really nice pilot in Kenya. Maybe Dennis, I would like to ask you to explain in 5 sentences what Sync is all about, and that's actually a challenge in 5 sentences. To as well share with everybody that yes, we are working on taking it to the next level and do RBF on outcome level.
Right, I'll try to explain it. I did have a conversation with Josh the other day already around this to also inform him that we are launching an RBF pilot in EnDev, in which we're looking to pay RBF incentives entirely 100% based on the outcome level, not only the outputs anymore. So that's the pilot, Barbara, that you're referring to, that we're starting at the moment. Of course, the challenge, and that's part of the pilot, is how do you then measure these outcomes? What will be your triggers in the verification system to release the funds? So that's a system that we're going to be building, and fortunately we also have a strong partner for this who also happens to be 60 decibels. So there's some commonalities here between projects already. I hope that helps a little bit in understanding what we're doing.
Yeah, and be ensured that although the RBF facility financed by UK Aid is coming to an end, seeing that again we have about 100 participants in this webinar, we will keep it in mind to offer as well similar webinars or events next year as soon as we have more details, and to share with everybody how to do RBF on outcome level, how does verification look like, how do we organize it method-wise. And this brings me to the next question I have on my list, which is diving into the digital world of approaches. We have heard 2 tools, but as well our speakers shared that, of course, the RBF facility dates back in the very beginning to 2012. So today we do have a lot of more tools and methodologies at hand. We had one question in the chat box, which I find as well quite interesting, and that is basically indicating not blindly and without questioning, just go for digital, but what are the pros and cons of having a localized verification process, people meeting people, towards more remote and centralized approaches towards verification. We see new tools and methodologies upcoming. The world of all paygo companies is highly digitalized. I think that would be as well interesting to learn from the experience, if that is highly welcome to use digital tools, or if there are as well barriers towards how far this is the way to go, and where it still needs the human beings and the real people meeting each other. So whoever feels addressed by this question.
I'm happy to make a start. Because I had already alluded to it in my presentation, that the verification system that I presented was from a time before GSM enabled tracking and Internet of Things. And so this obviously, it had a place at the time, this type of verification, and of course also with mass products like cook stoves, where you don't have that technology enabling yet to trace those stoves. Fortunately, the technology has advanced quite a bit in the meantime. We see more technology-enabled businesses, like, say, for example, Paygo, and that certainly opens up new possibilities for verification as well, that I'm also very, very excited about. The question here mentions Odyssey as a tool for mini grids or for Paygo. So there's definitely new possibilities created through technology to make verification a little bit easier. I don't think you'll get entirely around still actually meeting people and doing on-site checks as well. But it helps for sure. And then the second part of the question, can we see something like this applied to cook stoves? It actually happens to be the case that one of the advanced biomass cook stove companies in my presentation is working on having a chip integrated into their cook stove. So this is quite high end, quite futuristic, but they have an interest themselves in tracking those stoves and also tracking the usage of stoves for carbon income reasons. So we might actually see this kind of like tracking technology also built into cook stove technology in the future, also because these kind of trackers also become much cheaper.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dennis.
Well, I'd like to also add to
Absolutely.
Dennis is saying, I think it's a variety of methods that you should apply, whether it's going to be, online or digital and analog offline, processes. I think that speaks a lot to, just the nature of the products themselves. At some point, someone has to go and see them. I find the technology in the end is the most helpful for, collecting and compiling the data. When we first started, and again, even on the back end, we've worked with firms who collect data by paper. I think our first claims were submissions of warranty cards, and thousands of them, right? And we've seen overall firms have improved their data collection in those levels, and they have digital warranty systems. But the systems that are developed shouldn't be in a way that if you don't have the technology to invest or the high amount of funds to invest in huge database systems and mobile online systems, that you're excluded from RBF. I've seen, different criticisms, and I've asked different questions about this at different times. But the key to being, successful and having good data from a firm isn't the degree of technology that you have. It's the degree of local investment you make to be close to your customers and your market. And whether people have had the most advanced Paygo system or the most rudimentary data collection system, if you're not in the market where you're selling, it doesn't work. The information and the data is just not good versus the people that are there. And actually, the highest data quality I've seen of any claims was a complete pen and paper system that a firm managed with local SACCOs. I've never seen anything as crystal clear and concise as that. So, you know, technology is a tool, it's not always a solution. And if you don't have your process straight and your content and everything going in, you know, you're not going to get anything good coming out. Right? So it's like, you know, we all have laptops, but that doesn't make all of us novelists, right?
That's a nice, very vivid explanation, yes. Victoria, do you want to add something? If you're speaking, we cannot hear you.
Sorry. Technology is important because you're able to gather massive data within a very short time. The timelines are quite reduced, but it's also important to have a mix of both because you also need to contact your clients and your clients need to know that they can reach you if there is a problem. And what we have done, like now we are testing what we call the remote sensors, a small gadget that is attached to the biogas plant and it's linked to the system. So when a system is not working, you're able to look at the, when a biogas plant is not functioning, you quickly look at your system and you can tell which plants are not functioning where. However, it's good for the households to know that they can be able to reach you. And we have now developed what we call a grievance mechanism system, which is also linked to the system. And the farmers know that if my plant is not functioning, all I need to do is just do a small call, do a small SMS, and somebody will follow up. So digitalization is very important, especially in the era we are in, but it's good to have systems in place to be able to link up with your clients when, as and when required. I think that's what is important, to have a mix of both.
Thank you, Victoria. And looking at my clock here on my laptop, I see that it is now time to slowly come to an end with today's webinar, and really with a laughing and a weeping eye, because this has been number 4 of 4. I want to ensure you all that all the questions we have received, and as well some comments and specific challenges that have been faced or are being faced, we are going to review all the questions and comments in the chat box as we are in the finishing lines for the verification learning product to see and verify if we have addressed that, and as well can provide recommendations on that. Feel as well free to get in touch bilaterally. These webinars shall as well spark some interest in networking afterwards. It has become clear that verification systems for RBF projects can be very complex and context-specific in their design. And while there's lots of experience where we try to share and open our treasure box a little bit today, there is still a lot of nuts to crack, challenges to overcome, and not for everything there is the one solution at hand or the methodology in place. So just as RBF designs evolve and are pushed to target more difficult target groups, technologies, new technologies coming up as well, the verification processes need to go hand in hand and adapt and go through a learning process. As illustrated by our speakers, if you want to know the real value you get for your money, there is no way around really designing and implementing rigorous verification systems. Over 7 years of implementation of the RBF facility, we have developed a lot of difficult and innovative ways to do this and to develop lean verification procedures, adapting claim sizes, frequency, as well as sampling parameters to maximize process efficiency. In addition, RBF projects have generated numerous co-benefits and demonstrated that data from verification processes can as well yield crucial information about the end users, about the performance of technology, about outcome level indications, and that in the end as well making the link to the sustainability of our interventions. The feedback that companies receive on RBF claims are often received to be even more valuable than the RBF incentives. We have heard that from our speakers as well, as they help the companies to grow, to professionalize their business, and to learn more about their customer base. It is nonetheless important to consider that acceptability of verification activities can vary by culture and technology. A continuous feedback and learning loop is required to adapt verification processes, and this needs to be very transparent and shared with everybody, with users, beneficiaries, companies you work with. In conclusion, one key success factor of any RBF project relies on knowing if and when the payment of incentives for the results the market actors claim to have achieved. And we have some participants as well today here who are on the other side of the story, receiving payments, and shared in the chat box as well the struggle if your payments are not coming in, and that was highlighted as well, that this goes hand in hand, and verification is the link to make sure that those payments can flow to the companies who have worked on their results. It can be complex in the design, but it's a powerful value and insight into the market as well for us and the companies. Yes, and with this, I would like to conclude, and I hope you enjoyed this number 4 webinar of 4 as much as I enjoyed it, and hopefully everybody else too. I would like to close today's webinar now and mention that we will provide the recording, of course, again of the webinar and the slide deck of all the presentations on our website. If you are already on our RBF emailing list, you will receive an email to announce when all the uploads have been done. If you have not yet subscribe to that, then you can contact our colleagues Sarah Wollring and Franziska Munzinger. They will surely have their contacts on one of the next slides, or they will post them in the chat box. The RBF webinar series herewith comes to an end. We had 4 interesting sessions to deep dive into this world of RBF, but we are not going to disappear. We are going to be back at the beginning of December, and we are going to have the grand finale to jointly celebrate the achievements of the RBF facility, where we are switching the format slightly from a webinar style to a high-level talk show virtual panel discussion to close the chapter of the RBF facility and look into the future, into where has RBF evolved since the initial idea in 2012. Talking as well about where have we sparked interest into RBF, where have our learnings already been taken up by other programs and projects. The date and time will be communicated soon. I hope to see many of you there again. And with this, it's left for me to thank everybody for participating today, so especially to UK8 and FCDO, as well as our other 4 core donors of the EnDev partnership, especially to our speakers who opened their and were willing to share their experience, their challenges as well, and to present how they found solutions in their specific projects and countries. Towards all participants, with more than 100 people again being with us for this topic of verification. And last but not least, to our EnDev RBF team steering the RBF facility and the learning agenda and organizing this webinar series. Thank you very much for that. I hope to meet you again in the big closing event in December. You will receive information on that in due time. And with this, I wish you all a good day, a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending where you are. So thank you very much, and we will see you hopefully next time.